Bares Ogmundur Jonasson. Mr. Jonasson, I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you very much.
And welcome to Kurdistan.
Thank you.
Thanks. First question.
Yeah.
How did you become interested in the Kurdish cause?
Well, there has always been interest in the Kurdish cause in Iceland. We were, as Icelanders, part of the Danish kingdom, wanting to become independent, which we became in 1944. We based our independence on geography and culture. We have good understanding for everybody who is wanting the same. Now, when I was young, I read quite a bit about the Kurdish cause. There were several Icelanders at the time who covered the whole political spectrum from right to left, who were advocates of the Kurdish cause. One of them was the brother of my grandfather. He was a conservative. Then you had a leftist journalist who wrote a lot about the Kurds. And then you had Erlendur Haraldsson.
Okay. We are talking about which year here?
We
70s?
are talking about the 60s.
60s?
Yeah, 60s. I'm born in 1948, so this is when I was curious about everything. And Erlendur Haraldsson, he, who later became a professor at Iceland's university, he became one of the spokesmen for Iraqi Kurds in Germany in the 1960s, and he visited Barzani and made friends with him, visited him in the mountains here, and wrote a book. And I read this book. I read many articles. This is how I became originally interested. And when Erlendur Haraldsson died a couple of years ago, after visiting Barzani, the younger Barzani, several years ago, I was one of the people who carried his coffin, when he was buried. Not because we were politically at one, we were not, but we were united in one thing. We supported the Kurds. So the support for the Kurds, understanding of the Kurdish issue has always been with us in Iceland.
So a geography that's named Kurdistan is something familiar for people in Iceland.
It's familiar, and the way I have approached the Kurdish cause in recent years, this was through my work in Strasbourg in the Council of Europe. I met a lot of Kurdish people there. It was from the Turkish side. I became part of the international initiative Freedom for Abdullah Öcalan, Peace in Kurdistan, and I visited Turkey many times, 5 times, under this heading. So I got acquainted with a lot of people who were working for the Kurdish cause. Now I'm here in Iraqi Kurdistan at the invitation or under the auspices of K&K, and we have visited a lot of, or many political parties, and had contact with all political parties. And here I am to get an understanding of the politics of this country and the geopolitical complexities as well. And this has been very interesting for me to do that.
So the purpose of the visit is to contact political parties, as you met with, I think, all the political parties during the last week in Kurdistan here.
Yes, and to understand the situation. You see, what we have seen in Turkey is the imprisonment of thousands of people, academics, lawyers, journalists, and Kurdish people, mainly Kurdish people. And now, recently, we have seen the rise in violence in Rojava, in the borders of Iraqi Kurdistan and Turkey, and we are very concerned about this. And we want to understand how this can be stopped, because this is, of course, not only a threat to the people under attack, but to the whole region. And this is why we are here, to understand the geopolitical complexities.
Mr. Janssen, in your talks with different political parties who each have a different approach and a policy too, do you think that the Kurdistan region of Iraq is under a big threat? Did you sense that from their talk?
Very much so, and I think this is the crux of the problem. Everybody we met wanted peace. Everybody wanted an end to the atrocities by the Turkish army in the border regions, whether with this country or in Rojava. But then one gradually learns about the geopolitical complexities, what I call. Thus, I think everybody realizes that a strong democratic Iraqi Kurdistan strengthens the cause of Kurds everywhere, in Turkey, in Rojava, in Iran. And this is why we are experiencing the attacks from Iran. This is why we see the pressures exerted on Iraqi Kurdistan from Turkey. This is why we see that Baghdad wants to undermine Iraqi Kurdistan. It's not in order only to undermine this country, but their role in the Kurdish cause in the whole region.
So
I think any honest observer will recognize this.
Mm-hmm. So the aim is not this part only. It's the biggest picture on the map.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And then the question is how, and we are seeing a deadlock. And this deadlock is deadly. It's deadly for the people who are under attack. Mm-hmm. And it is deadly in the sense that it threatens peace throughout the Middle East and throughout the world. So the task is to find how to break this deadlock. Mm-hmm. And here we look back to history. We look to the years 2013-15 mm-hmm. when we had a peace process ongoing, whereby the prison doors at Imrali were opened mm-hmm. and Abdullah Öcalan was able to engage in a peace process. And I think if this is restarted, it would have the effect of a domino. Mm. You start there, and it will have an effect elsewhere throughout the region. This is the only way of breaking the deadlock, I believe. So I see the problems of Kurdistan, as universal for all Kurds, the whole Kurdish region.
Here in Kurdistan, we have, you talked about the attacks. We have Iran attacking Kurdistan on baseless pretexts.
Yes.
What can be done, especially by the international community, to prevent Iran from taking another attack like that?
We must recognize that it is not only the Turkish authorities mm-hmm. to blame. It is the whole Western complex, NATO, the European Union. They are all complicit in this. We talk about the Imrali regime. Mm-hmm. The imprisonment of Abdullah Öcalan now for a quarter of a century is a way of saying to the Kurdish people, this is what can happen to you. This is what can happen to all those who do not go along with us. And I think the European Union, the Americans, NATO, they all have a role to play here, because this could and is escalating into a very, very serious situation throughout the Middle East. it's interesting that we hear about the attacks from Iran recently, and this was reported widely in the Western press. But what they did not report were such attacks in recent months and recent years. And they do not tell us about what is happening from Baghdad, measures taken to undermine the sovereignty of Iraqi Kurdistan. And they do not tell us about the pressures exerted on this country from Turkey. So all this must be taken into the open, and the West must recognize its own responsibility. Dwight Eisenhower, he made a speech in 1952 where he said, one thing you must take good care of, never lose control of the military-industrial complex. We are losing control of it now. It's governing the world, and this must be stopped. And we will be going back to Europe. I will be going back to Iceland, and we are going to spread the word that the responsibility belongs to all of us.
When we say Iceland, you are a small nation, but successful in defending yourself. What experience can the Kurds take from Icelandic?
Well, what made us strong was a belief in ourselves. We are only 400,000 people, but we are never quite sure whether we are 400,000 or 400 million. We know it doesn't really matter. We know what is important is a belief in ourselves. And I say that a nation that preserves its culture, preserves its language, works for social justice, can never be defeated. But if you let somebody steal from you your culture, steal from you your language, steal from your heritage, then you can be defeated.
Culture and language, the Kurdish culture and language is still facing threats. Kurdish language, for example, in Iran, Turkey, in Syria, by constitution, is not allowed to be studied. In Iceland's case, as a small nation, how could you preserve the culture and language?
Because we wanted to. And it's, you see, things do not happen. Things do not just do not happen. They're always doers. They're always doers. And as long as you believe you are a doer and you work for something, then you should do that. And I think another thing which has been important for us is cohesiveness in society. We had a big bank crisis in 2008, 2009.
Yeah.
Now, we came out of that. How? Well, we have a saying in Icelandic, that if you get into trouble at sea, in heavy weather, you must take to the oars together, and then you will get ashore. But you must be on the same boat. Everybody must be on the same boat. So this will never be divorced from the idea of social cohesiveness and social justice in society. So that must be part of the package.
You have a state, Kurds don't have a state. In this case, how Kurds can preserve the language and culture while they don't have a state?
Well, they could, without any states in the past. They could do that in the past. But they are not, because of their own doings, losing control of their language and their heritage. It's others who are having, resorting to coercive pressures, and that must be stopped. And here, the whole world has a responsibility. I once met some social activists in Ahmed. This was in 2017. And one of them said, and this is memorable, he said, "Don't worry about us. We will survive. We will fight till the bitter end. We will not lose. Worry about yourselves. Worry about Europe. Worry about the rest of the world. Save it from its humiliation." So in order to save it from its humiliation, we are here, and we are going to spread the word. And this we have been trying to do in recent years. I have had many meetings in Iceland, open public meetings, written a lot of articles, so have other people. And I think something is changing now. I think so. I think if you look at Israel, Palestine, if you look at Ukraine, you see, up to now, we are told that history started in February 2022 with the unprovoked Russian invasion, as they phrased it. No history. In Israel, it started on the 7th of October. But everybody has a history. The Jews have a history. The Palestinians have a history. Ukraine has a history. And now, when things are getting very serious in the Middle East, in Ukraine, people are becoming interested in history, And there are more people now talking about Sèvres. There are more people talking about Lausanne in the 1920s than ever before. And this is what, the world is waking up to the importance of history. And this is working for the Kurds, for the Kurdish cause. If we get aware of how big a nation the Kurds are, how they are being coerced, their language, their culture, I think things will change. There's a better chance now than ever. But at the same time, it is more important, absolutely vital, that we wake up to the necessity of restarting a peace process.
Peace process. Do you see any chance in Turkey to restart a peace process to resolve the Kurdish cause?
I think it needs pressure from the outside. I think it needs pressure from Europe, from the United States, from NATO. You see, when the atrocities began in 2015, 2016, NATO held a meeting in Brussels in the late summer, and as I understood it, gave a green light to what would happen. And then we know what happened. You know what happened. I know what happened. The rest of the world didn't know. None of the international organizations took it up. It needed the Russell Tribunal, the People's Tribunal in Paris to take up the matter and look into the atrocities. I was there. I was there for two days. I saw the devastation. People haunted out of their homes, 500,000 people on the run. And I promised I would never stop until I made this public. And I invited some of the people who bore witness at the tribunal to come to Iceland and explain to us. But the world was quiet, has been quiet. So the task is to make known what is happening. And now we want to make known what is happening in the border regions of Iraqi Kurdistan, what is happening in Rojava by the Turkish aggression, and tell the European Union, tell NATO, the US, and the people of Europe that this is not to be tolerated, because the pressure must come from the people.
How do you see the future of Rojava?
Well, if I tell you how I see the future of Rojava and of Kurdistan in general, in Turkey, here, Rojava, Iran, I'm very optimistic for the Kurds, very optimistic. But it takes time, it takes years. But things can, because things can change very quickly. They can change quickly. And I think we are, and if we manage to restart the peace process, I refer to a domino theory. You start here, and then another, it has an effect and an effect.
Yeah.
And you don't know exactly what will happen, but it will be for the good. It will be for the good for everybody.
If there's one thing that you can give as an advice, what is the one single thing that Kurds can take as an experience from Iceland?
What I said before about culture, language, heritage, don't let it be stolen from you. Then you will be invincible.
Language, culture, and heritage.
And of course, social cohesion, social justice. Put everybody on the same boat.
This question is not related to Kurdish cause. Why your country, Iceland, is not a member of the EU?
Well, there are the majority of Icelanders has been against it. We don't want to have our fishing under European control. We want to preserve the stocks ourselves. That is one of the main reasons. But then there are others, that the European Union has become ever more centralized. And in my view, it is too much based on marketization, marketization of the economy. And marketization is moving society away from democracy. It is depriving or diminishing democracy. Europe is becoming all too centralistic, all too market-oriented. There was one idea in the European Union which I thought was very good. That was the idea of Europe of the regions. Europe of the regions, not states, Europe of the regions. And this idea could solve a lot of problems. The Catalonian problem, Basque problem, Scottish. It opened up new doors. And if the European Union became looser, based on regions which in their turn were linked to culture, language, will of the people, that would be a future I would support. But this going into this central market company, no thank you.
Mr. Ögmundur Jónasson, I'm so happy to have you here. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Welcome again.
Thank you.